everybody. Welcome to LiveCast Conversations with Powered by Pealed Back. As always, I'm your host, Gene Bernier, the coactive coach. And today is episode 75, another milestone in the LiveCast Conversations with roadmap and journey. Today, we have Brenden Kumarasamy on with us. Brenden is the founder of MasterTalk. He coaches ambitious executives and entrepreneurs to become the top 1% communicators in their industry. He's also a popular YouTube channel called MasterTalk with the goal of providing free access to communication tools for everyone in the world. Brenden, thanks so much for being on the show today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Gene. It's great to be on.
All right, on. So let's talk about the journey to helping people become the best communicators in their industry. Share a little bit about how did this journey happen for you?
Yeah, for sure, brother. So when I was in university, I used to do these things called case competitions. Think of it like professional sports, but for nerds.
I
So
love it.
other guys my age were playing baseball or rugby or soccer or some other dangerous thing that I clearly wouldn't play, as you can tell by looking at me. Not really built for that type of stuff. I did presentations competitively, and that's how I learned the art of how to communicate. And I also learned the art of accidentally coaching other people on how to do it. Because as new students were entering that ecosystem, we didn't really have a speech coach. So I started helping them with their communication. That's how I learned the skill to start MasterTalk a few years later.
That's awesome. Now, is that something that came because there was older students that were helping coach you and it was just kind of this thing that passed down? Or did you see like an opportunity going, I want to win and I want my team, if this is a team event for schools, to like kick ass?
So the answer is 100% both.
Okay.
So I'm super competitive. So I definitely wanted us to win. I actually grew an unhealthy obsession. For case comp, I always like to say to my friends as a joke, I'm like the Michael Jordan that nobody really cares about because Michael Jordan like did basketball and was like
Yeah.
super vicious and aggressive, but people care about basketball. I did the same thing, very similar, I would say, with competitions, but nobody cares about what a case competition is, right? So absolutely right. But the other part to your question is also true because what happens is this program has been around since the late 90s around. And a lot of the students who have been through case competitions get the most coveted jobs in business world. And
Okay.
most of them become vice presidents in their early 30s or high level ranking executives. So after they climb up the corporate ladder, their give back is actually helping the students. So the answer is both.
Oh, yeah. Excellent. And I imagine as well, there's like a hidden incentive as well. You while you're coaching these kids, while they're kids, you're building a strong relationship, which then can transcend when they are in those top roles in those big Fortune 500 companies.
Yeah, that was kind of an unintended consequence. I was just helping them because I wanted to. But
Yeah.
you're right, today, now that I have a business, yes, it does feel good when you have a strong contact in pretty much every single company in the Fortune 500. So, which is good.
Well, it opens up a lot of doors, right? Like it really does come down to like who you know is a critical component around your own like success, and your reputation is a big part about that. So that
Absolutely.
must have helped leverage. How has your reputation leveraged from there, from being in school now to where you are running your own business, doing this and coaching other people around it?
Yeah, absolutely, brother. You know what I would say is, I mean, I might be over exaggerating a bit because my network is still fairly young, right? Because I started coaching when I was 19. I'm 25 currently, and most of my
Yeah.
clients are in their 40s and 50s. So because of that, I'm still not able to fully leverage the network that I built in university.
Right.
Those seeds will probably start blooming in the next 3 years because most of my friends now are starting to become managers in companies, and some of them will become VPs in probably the next 3, 4 years.
Yeah.
But I would say the biggest thing, to make this a lesson for people is pour into the right people. It's not about the person's title, their status, the money in their bank account. It's all about who is pouring into you. So one strategy I recommend that I call the value list is make a list of 10 individuals that you're really inspired by that are in your network already and that really pour into you, that help you, that support you. And if you keep supporting the go-givers in your network, eventually the seeds will blossom in your favor always.
Oh, I love that. It's like it's watering the right kind of plants and not just doing the spray and pray aspect of it too, right? Is like identifying who in that value in your top 10 is choosing to pour into you, and then you get to go return that, and that's where a deep like rapport and relationships can be built from.
Absolutely.
I love that. That is a great. There's the gem of the day right there. You just poured it right out, man. That's incredible. Has that always been important to you, or is this something that intuitively you've known, or something that you've kind of learned as you've grown?
Yeah, the power of adding value. So here's my perspective on this, Gene, that I've learned, I guess, from being a few years in the industry, is what does value actually mean? And a lot of people go say the adding value, we gotta add value, but no one really knows what are you doing, right?
It's that mystical thing.
Right. It's just like people are just like adding value, but they do nothing. And I think Chris Do explains this so well. Chris Do's the founder of The Future. He helps creatives across the world. He has an incredibly successful YouTube channel with almost 2 million subscribers.
Yeah.
And what Chris says that I love is he says the definition of value is tell me something that I don't already know. Okay, tell me something that surprises me, that shocks me, that I didn't really think of. So whenever I'm on a podcast or I'm sharing an idea, my thought process is always, how do I turn any story that I can deliver on a show or any question that I get asked into an insight that nobody has heard before? And the value list is one example of those insights that I created, but I focus on the stuff that really is juicy, not things like never give up or stay consistent,
Because, there's nothing surprising about that. Those are the things, the interesting part about that I hear from that is like at the core of it, those are the core tenets or the pillars of a lot of like the insights to it. But then it comes that juicy part that you get to bring is your perspective on it and the words and the ways that you shape it. Because it's going to allow somebody else who's may be looking at like that, don't give up and put all your heart into it, actually be a nice person, connect with people. They're going to hear from your story and go, oh, I didn't think about doing it like that. That's incredible. Yeah, I can take that piece and apply it right now.
Absolutely. And that's another piece of value that I'm really focused on, and I don't think a big group of people are, is anything that's coming out of your mouth directly leading to results for people. Like, can somebody listen to you in a podcast and go, oh, I can actually apply that immediately? Versus if I talked about relationship building as a principle, you'd be like, oh, okay, I guess that makes sense, but like, what do I do tomorrow? Versus the value list, people can just write those 10 names right away and rank them based on how much people are pouring into them.
That's an important component to it. Is that a concept that's come out of like when you were learning how to do these case competitions? Is like, how do I mix like this educational component versus with like the takeaway action, like leaving somebody with a feeling great and something they can apply that right away?
That's a very powerful and nuanced question, Gene. Absolutely, you're absolutely on the money here. Because, and to give you more context, I never done a podcast in the context of case competitions. What I would always tell students, and people hammer this down my head too. When I was getting started, I thought I was hot, but I ended up making a lot of mistakes in the early days, and I still do.
Oh, yeah.
But what I would tell the students is simple. So what? You have a slide. You have information you want to share. So what? Why should the executive who's sitting there as a judge, why should they care about what you're delivering? And why does each slide matter? And another analogy I can give is you want to debate each slide like a lawyer and prove why all of those bits of information actually matters. And that practicality trickled into MasterTalk, because when I started making YouTube videos in my mom's basement, it was never meant to be this, business or anything. Basically, what happened, Gene, is after university was done, I had coached 7,500 people on how to speak. They kept asking me, how did you learn how to speak? And I didn't have an answer to it. So I started watching YouTube videos on the platform, and I realized that none of these tips were layered in practicality. It was just, Gene, you should just be yourself and like follow your heart and just take the mist. And then I was like, wait, what? Like, none of this makes any sense. So it was that need for practicality that did start with case competition. I love that you tied that in, and that now plays into every single ounce of my body and what I teach.
I don't know if you've heard this before, but the way you talk, and especially about practicality and pulling all that together, I'm getting some strong Gary Vee vibes. Is he a bit of a person that you've watched or something before, or is this just a total new point out?
No, absolutely. Gary Vee's a big fan of. I'm a big fan of his. I love the work that he's done, and he's definitely someone I modeled my communication style after, because I like being punchy and straight to the point. But what I will also say is Gary Vee's style is a bit different in the sense that what he's done is he said, what are the high level principles that I can apply for a mass audience? And let me just keep repeating those over and over again, like gratitude, hard work, the importance of surrounding yourself with positivity. Whereas with me, I would say I'm more like what I try to model anyways is more like Seth Godin, where it's more punchy, but Seth Godin really goes deep into the weeds and really tries to intellectualize everything he's teaching. That's what I want to strive for, but have definitely not at that level yet.
I see that. So it's like where Gary's doing this very like wide the top of the T part for his most of his anything you see on like LinkedIn or Instagram is always like this high stuff where you are powering down into this niche of this, to make people that are top 1%. You're taking the deep dive into all those conversations.
Absolutely. And once again, it's worth emphasizing nothing wrong with Gary Vee's approach.
No.
Like, big fan of his work. I don't understand why people hate him so much. He's a great individual. But definitely, in the context of what I do, I think it's really important for the people that I'm targeting, which are super exceptional people, whether they're a 7-year-old girl, by the way, who are coding, or whether they're an executive, to know that if they want to go 50 inches deep, my content can provide that for them.
I love that. Well, that's a great hook and a tripwire to pull people in. Be like, what are they going to expect when they work with you? Be like, we're going to go deep, and here's what that's going to mean, and how is that going to then apply within their own industry or their service vertical.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the mission is a good place to start. My mission in the world, Gene, is I think the next Elon Musk is probably some 7-year-old girl who can't afford me in some part of the world. So that's why for me it's so important that MasterTalk, the YouTube channel specifically, is a resource for anyone who can't afford me. So if somebody, is like 15 years old and is scared of communication, I want that person to be able to go to YouTube and still be able to watch all the videos and know exactly how to implement public speaking into their game. And yeah, of course, we definitely have coaching clients who are mostly executives and entrepreneurs and coaches, and those people generally work with me if they want to be the best in the world at what they do.
Right. And I think that's an interesting. I love that you just dropped your mission there, and I love the way that you framed it. I think it's very powerful, and I imagine it's one of those things that you wake up in the morning, regardless of how you're feeling, be like, I get to go serve to this mission. I'm going to show up to it and just keep grinding away for it. It's like Tony Robbins talks about having that compelling future, and that's a compelling future, I think, right there.
100%, brother. Like for me, like I love it. Before I used to spend my hours at meetings, and now I get to spend my hour talking to amazing, incredible hosts like you and sharing the story, exchanging ideas, and coaching people as well.
I think it's wonderful. Well, let's talk a little bit about because you worked for IBM and now you're fully out on your own. Tell us a little bit about that journey. As we were talking before the show started, preface this is that I think we both feel like not everyone's meant to be an entrepreneur. And sometimes that's why we do this show. It's like, there's a lot of bumps and trips and everything else that go along before you get like this, like, oh my God, you're an overnight success. This is a triumph. Tell us about what happened behind the curtain before all of that was able to come for you.
Absolutely. And I always like to preface by saying, Gene, that I'm the anti-entrepreneur. If you had told me I was going to be an entrepreneur as a night, I would have laughed you out of the room. I was like, you crazy? Why would anyone be an entrepreneur? You can get a guaranteed multiple 6-figure salary working for somebody else. Yeah. And if you live in the right city, that's not, I don't know, LA or New York, you're going to have a very good life, right? With zero risk. You have to work a lot, of course. Yeah. You have to be really good at the job, but there's no risk. You don't have to invent a new idea. And you're generally tasked with one specific outcome in the company. So let's say you're the director of marketing and you work for a big company. That's what you have to do. You take care of marketing. If you're excellent at it, you get paid a lot of money to do it. But entrepreneurship is a completely different game. You have to master every single part of the value chain. Yeah. Right? You have to sell the product. You have to deliver the product. You have to do customer service. You have to do marketing, sales. You have to do every single part of the value chain. So if you're not absolutely obsessed by the business that you're building, you're definitely in the wrong sport and you're probably going to lose. So for me, when it came to entrepreneurship, the only reason I pursued it was for 3 main reasons. Number one, I already had a real well-paying job that was paying me well over 6 figures, right? So I was already pretty happy in my corporate job. I already had the money. So this is not a money thing. The second thing was before quitting my corporate gig, I already had replaced most of my income, so I already had a proven product that was already selling. And then the third piece is I was obsessed to make it work, even if I never got paid to do it. And I think that's important because most people quit their jobs without anything and no thought process. And the biggest risk for any entrepreneur is that you don't know what you're doing.
And here's the secret: at any given point, the rules change, and whatever got you to that point is like it's not going to be the thing that gets you to the next point. So like we're all winging it, and that's just the truth. Like, but you have to be okay with that, right?
Absolutely. And one other thing as well, Gene, I got super lucky because I'm not a solo entrepreneur. Thinks that people think I am. I actually have an amazing business partner that nobody knows about, whose name's Vamsi. And he's the guy who actually helped me structure my business. He's double my age. He's really smart, and he's my 50-50 joint venture partner. So he's
Cool.
the reason that I got so capable in the industry, and I was able to charge the rates despite being very young and to get
Yeah.
the success. So yeah, there's a lot of moving parts behind me, and I don't recommend entrepreneurship for most people.
I think we are 100% aligned on that because, like we said earlier, like there's nothing wrong with being like a number 2, 3, 50, 100, whatever it is. Like, get those skills, learn it. There is a component of safety and certainty that comes with it. And don't get me wrong, like there are some horrible job situations out there that's a reality too. And there's so much ability to get training and upskilling that you can make yourself a really great opportunity under somebody who wants to do the crazy stuff of like owning it all and taking all the crazy risk.
Absolutely.
So how did you get it in connection with your business partner? Because there's a lot of solopreneurs out there, people that are doing it on their own. And there's something that I miss about having a solid team that's working with you.
Absolutely. Once again, got super lucky with this. It's not something people can replicate, but I'm happy to tell the story.
Yeah.
So for me, what it always comes down to, Gene, is intentional proximity. So I'll give you the example with me and Vamsi. I met him at an event called Summit of Greatness. Lewis Howes, for those who don't know, is the host of the School of Greatness podcast. He's
Great.
been my hero since I was like 20. And I always wanted to go to his live event, but I couldn't afford it. And by the way, Lewis's event isn't that expensive. Okay, it's like $300 the ticket. But I was dirt poor before I
Yeah.
started working in corporate. And the year that I started working at IBM was the first year I could ever afford Lewis's conference. So I took the $300. I took a flight there, and he has workouts in the morning at like 5 a.m. And I met Vamsi at one of those 5 a.m. workouts, and that's how we became business partners. And then we met at other events and built a relationship.
Yeah.
But the point I want to drive is even if I say I was lucky, if you really think about it, not really, because I made the decision to be in that moment at that place in time, and so did he. And most people aren't willing to go to the extra mile because most people with that, let's say that $1,500 probably would have spent it on a vacation.
Yeah.
Whereas me, it's like I'm going to Columbus, Ohio. That's where the event was, like the middle
Yeah.
of nowhere. I still don't know where that is. Just the flight took me there, and I went to the event. There's 2,000 people at the event, and then actually 1,500, and then in the morning there's probably like 50 people at that 5 a.m. workout,
Yeah.
and we were those 50 people.
I think that's incredible, and I think that there's that when you talk about going that extra mile, even going to those conferences. Sometimes it's like, oh, I'm going to go sit in that room, get all the information, and then bounce. Be like, no, like if you're going to go there and they have like outside things like that, invest because you're right. It like we talked about earlier, it comes down to who you know. And the best way to get to know somebody is way better than when somebody's up on stage and you turn to the guy and be like, what do you think of that? That's a short bit, but to be able to be like, oh, we're gonna go work out with Lewis Howe and 49 other people, be like, that's intimate. That's like when you start to find beyond business, I think.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. Well, and Lewis Howe, the School of Greatness just turned 9 years old this week too. So
Right.
it's incredible what can happen when you put that long-term work into it as well.
Well said.
Yeah. So how long were you living like a double life of being an executive at IBM and building what at the start was a side hustle?
Yeah, so it's worth emphasizing. I was an executive at IBM. I was close to being an executive. If I stayed there like 3-4 years, I would have been an executive.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was probably closer to like a senior role there. But yeah, I would say for the double life, I would probably have been doing it for 2 years
Yeah.
when I really started taking business seriously. So I started the YouTube channel before I started working at IBM, but in terms of making it a business, probably the last 18 months, last 24 months, and it was tough, man. I
Yeah.
was working like 100 hours a week, no kidding, because I was doing because if you're getting paid well at IBM, you're not doing 9 to 5, right? You're working a lot more than 9 to 5. It's probably 60, 70 hours a week,
Yeah.
and I was putting the other 30 into MasterTalk, the hours I had. So yeah, it was gut wrenchingly painful. And then when Clubhouse started, I was on Clubhouse like in the early days, probably almost every day to grow the YouTube channel. So yeah, it
Yeah.
was a hustle for sure.
Well, I know a few people that have been on Clubhouse, but like, tell me about your experience and how you leveraged a new platform to then grow an outside subscribership on YouTube.
Yeah, Clubhouse for wasn't really good for most people, but I would say for me, Clubhouse was the perfect storm because I was like user number 500,000. I was super early on the platform.
Yeah.
And the other piece as well is it's a voice app and I'm a communication coach, right? So
Yeah.
if I speak well, people want to know who the guy who's speaking. And what's also great about Clubhouse, and nobody cares what you look like, they only care about what comes out of your mouth because it's just a
Right.
picture. It's
Yeah.
really just your voice. So yeah, me and my buddy Billy Samoa Salibi, who's also pretty active on LinkedIn, me and him just gutted Clubhouse. We spent like 10, 12 hours a day on it. No
Oh
joke. Like
wow.
he pretty much gave up on his wife for 3 months. It was hilarious. And yeah, and it was awesome. Honestly, I could have leveraged it better. I could have had better funnels and thought process. But Clubhouse was super beneficial for the first 90 days. It's not beneficial anymore. I don't think it's a good use of people's time now.
Yeah.
But definitely at the beginning, absolutely yes.
Well, and I guess maybe that goes back to that proximity that you talk, that intentional proximity, because like there was a lot of like bigger names on it during that first 3 months of like the Clubhouse craziness. Is like being in there and being in some of those rooms allows for a different style of conversation, maybe an access to a group of people that you wouldn't have been able to trip into like on like a Twitter or like a YouTube organically or Facebook even.
Well said. Well said. That's why I'm always a big believer in being a first mover if you can. Like for example, I totally missed the boat on TikTok. I'm not going to hit myself for it. That's life.
Yeah.
But definitely for Clubhouse, we did meet a lot of high profile people early because of exactly what you said, and we were able to leverage it. But there's always opportunities for growth for sure and
Right.
improvement.
And you mentioned that it was you and a friend that were kind of like bum rushing Clubhouse. Were you guys doing this in concert to help support one another, or was there like a joint venture, or what did that look like?
Yeah, it was mostly just friends knocking it out. We just both liked working together.
Yeah.
Me and Billy don't really like we refer each other business, but we're not really like a joint venture. I think it's more just we like doing shows together and we do it on LinkedIn from time to time too.
Yeah.
And it was just really fun. We're really good at it, honestly. Like every other platform I kind of suck at except for guesting on podcasts and making YouTube videos.
Yeah.
So Clubhouse was a fun medium while it lasted.
What was, how can somebody identify when they got like that opportunity to like to strike and get into there? Like, what was that? What would you say for somebody who could get into one of these there's going to be more of these platforms. Their platforms are going to keep coming out until technology exists in our world. That's a given. So how can somebody go into it being like a virtually unknown and like really show up, aside from ignoring their wife for 3 months?
Absolutely. Not me because I'm not married, but definitely Billy's wife. But yeah, I would say for me, man, it's always about having a bias for action. So you want to spend 90% of your time always on whatever you're focused on. So
Yeah.
for me, the focus, even when I was on Clubhouse, was still YouTube. It was still guesting on podcasts and growing my coaching business. And of course, working my corporate job and trying to survive that all while I was working on those three priorities. But you should always be thinking about 10% on new, at the very minimum,
Yeah.
on new ideas, new ways of differentiating yourself from everyone else. And that's why having a strong network really helps, because they help you generate these new ideas that you probably wouldn't be able to think of on your own.
Yeah.
And that's the way I think about it. I'll give you a recent example right now. LinkedIn audio is about to drop for all of us. Do I think LinkedIn audio is the next best thing since sliced bread? Not really. I mean, the pandemic's kind of over now and a lot of people don't want to spend a few hours. But do I think that LinkedIn will probably push that up for the next 30 days because they invested millions of dollars in R&D to make that work?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. So is it worth putting 10% of my time into it if I have so much expertise from my Clubhouse days and I get to do it, Billy? Probably, right? So that's the thing. It doesn't mean it's going to work, but you should always invest 10%
Yeah.
of your time on those new ideas. Most of them will fail, but even if just one of them takes off, you're off to the races.
Well, I think that's just like spectacular advice there. Like, you dropped so many great gems already, but like this whole like 90-10 or 80-20 rule is like, where's like your 80% focus, right? Because I find a lot of people that are trying to get into the traction, and I've been like guilty of this too. It's like you're bouncing all over the place. Like, where I'm going to sample here, oh, this thing's taking off, cool, I'm going to be like there, but you're like dipping your toe into like all these places and getting like no traction at all, or like just minimal traction. Now, if you pull that back and go, where's my 80% focus going to go? Hammer that all day. And then great, I get 20% to experiment. And I think it will makes you a lot more freer too, right? Because like if this is experiment time, you're not worried about like the traction. You're out there to try new silly things, or like things that you might not resonate in your 80%, where your target market knows you very well, and where you're talking about is like doing a silly dance on TikTok might not be the right thing for there. But just like in the Clubhouse days, it's just like, well, you could use that as like that. It attracts them. They get to know you as a different type of person, and they can still like join in on the conversation where business is happening.
Oh yeah, and another way of reframing what you said, which I loved, is the idea of that. This is why I'm such an advocate of being an employee, because that's what I call guaranteed traction. You hire me to deliver a specific result, whether you pay me $50 an hour, $25 an hour, $100 an hour, and if I deliver that result that's already outlined before the job begins, I get paid.
Yeah.
But in entrepreneurship, especially for entrepreneurs who are always, and this is what a lot of people do under $1 million a year, is they're always, or even 100,000, I would say,
Yeah.
is they're always like dwindling around like 10 different products and nothing's working. Versus what they should be doing is they should just have a corporate job and they trial that stuff, but there's no risk anymore because they're getting paid to learn, paid
Yeah.
to fail. But then if one of them starts working, they really put their focus and then it starts taking off, then they can quit their jobs and really spend all that time just growing that part of the business.
Yeah. And I think as well, like regardless is like there's a component of like no, there's a component of like this traction's not going to happen by mistake until you figure out like what it is that you're going to focus on, right? Like focus is a real powerful tool, like, and being spread everywhere without like a clear, compelling advice, like you're basically practicing until you can go, hey, this is my thing. This is where I'm going to go. Like you said earlier, 50 inches deep, 50 feet deep. This is like, I can go for keep digging.
Yeah, that's one way of saying it, man. Completely agree.
Yeah. So it's really, I think that's really interesting. I had a question again. It was pulling back. It sounds like there's this theme of like partnership for you, like doing things with somebody else kind of excites it a little bit more than being off on your own. Because you talked about your business partner, and then you and Billy go out there and do your shows together and hit all these different areas. Like when LinkedIn comes up, you already know who you're going to be like, dude, let's go spend 10%.
Yeah, man, and I'm glad you caught that because you're absolutely right. My coach tells me this is also my business partner. Vamsi says it best. He says, "Look, the bigger the dream, the better the team. If you have a really big dream for your life, like in my case, I want to help every human being on earth become exceptional communicators. I clearly don't have time to coach everybody. That's why doing shows like this is helpful because they'll reach maybe 100 people, 50 people, whatever the number is, for 1 hour of the time that we're spending. But the other piece is like, if you have a really big dream for the world, you need exceptional people around you because that's what allows you to push forward. And the other piece around partnerships that I want to emphasize is there's different types of partnerships. You don't necessarily need a business partner. In fact, a lot of business partnerships fail like marriages. So I think the key is more like filtering enough people to meet the right diamonds and holding on to those diamonds. So I'll give you an example with Billy because I think that will give people an idea. Is Billy's great. He's amazing. Probably the second best relationship I have right now besides Vamsi in my life. But people don't see the back end of how I met Billy. So I got introduced by Billy from a guy named Sam Kamani. But to get to Sam, I had to guest on 200 different podcasts.
Oh, wow.
So when the pandemic hit, I started pitching a bunch of shows that had no listeners just so I could practice getting on podcasts. And I kept in touch with only one of the hosts. and I had to go through 200 hours of
Yeah.
really bad shows. I'll be honest, it was really painful. Like I was on sports shows and be like, "Yo, what up, Brenden?" So like, "What do you do?" And I was like, "Oh my god," to get to Sam, and then I built a relationship with Sam to get to Billy. So I
Yeah.
literally had to go through hundreds of people to get to the golden gem that is Sam and Billy, and that's the point I want to drive for people: is you need to put in the work. Kind of like dating, you need to put in the work to just meet a bunch of people, and then there's going to be one or two out of 100 that you're just like, oh my god, where has this person been my whole life? And then when you find that person, you gotta latch onto them, like, and then after you add a bunch of value to those people, and
Yeah.
they'll introduce you to all the other diamonds that they know. That's the way you should be building relationships.
I love that. That is like, hey, who's ever listening, just pause, go back and re-listen to that, because that is going to change everything for you, right? Like it sounds bad, but like it is a numbers game. Like it isn't, unless you like that first couple, you hit it out of the park. You're like, oh, there you are. Then great, but like chances are like that's not going to always happen, and especially in like your early days. You talk about going on 200 podcasts. Like, hey, that's a lot of guest spots. Like, congratulations, and that again is an example of putting in the mad amount of work that's required to do this. Is like you just got to keep showing up and keep practicing, because sometimes you're like, I have an idea about where I'm going with this, and it actually takes this practice to like communicate it and like pull it out and like even make your own diamonds come out of it. Actually, we just had somebody comment on it that's watching us right now. Thanks, Mark. Great conversation. So many nuggets. I agree, brother. But yeah, it's like you have to turn into like this diamond factory, and like that means you got to get a whole bunch of ore, strip it all down, and then figure out kind of cut of diamonds are you trying to get, and then get really good at just identifying and processing it, knowing you're still going to have like a big pile of stuff that you're not using out the other end.
That was an excellent analogy, man. I love that. Right? And it really drives the point home as like it's not about like whether the person is good or not. It's just there's some people in our lives that you just connect with. You feel you've known your whole life, but you don't really know why. And because of this, and I'll give you another analogy to explain this, is that you don't have a lot of time to meet people. Let me give you the analogy. Let's say you meet somebody new every few days, Gene, right? Which is more than most. So every year you might meet 100 people, give or take. Okay, you meet somebody new every 3 days. Every year you meet 100 people. And let's say you live for 50 more years. So let's say you're 30 now, you live until 80, as an example. You'll only get to meet 5,000 people in your life. 50 years times 100 people per year. Once again, not to make this a math exam, but the question is, who do you want those 5,000 people to be? When you think of life from that perspective, you realize that, wait a second, out of billions of people, I only get to talk to 5,000. So when you go from that frame, you're like, oh crap, I need to be a lot more aggressive with the people that are already serving me and tripling down on those people versus trying to find like a million other people to talk to.
Yeah. Well, and that as well is like a great point. It's like you don't need to talk to hundreds of thousands of people. Be like the people that you're going to coach and work with, like in that same lifetime is going to be like hundreds, maybe thousands, depending on how you're delivering and everything. It's just like unless you've got an app, then like TikTok or even all the platforms that we're being watched on now that have hundreds of millions, maybe even billions of people, be like that's an oddity, right? So like out of those 5,000 people, what hundreds are going to be the ones that you're going to line with to work with, and then tens of those are going to be people that you're like, oh, like did we just become best friends? Are we going to go do karate in the garage? Let's
love that.
Like I think that's just such an important message to hear.
Absolutely.
So what is next for you, my friend?
Yeah, I would say for me, what's next? I've been super blessed, Gene. Sometimes I look at my life and I'm like, wow, what happened? I'm just on podcasts. People ask me questions that I, for some reason, know the answer to. Flying around all these places, coaching people. I would say for me, the mission now is scaling. Now that the YouTube channel has a lot more traction than when I started 3 years ago, now it's about how do I bring this to the world? How do I impact a lot more lives? That means guesting on more podcasts. That means doing more live free trainings. That means coaching more people, spending a lot more time doing, meeting people in person, going back to conferences. But yeah, I would say that the overarching vision is really scaling the impact so that it reaches more people now.
what does that look like for you? So how, if somebody's looking at this, heard this, like, oh my Lord, I need to work with you. What's those going to start to look like for you when you think about scale?
Yeah, for sure, man. What I always say is like that, there's two easy ways to help out. The first one is simple. The MasterTalk YouTube channel. Go on YouTube, type MasterTalk in one word, and then you have access to hundreds of videos for free that you can just watch to become a better speaker. And then for those of you who want to get coaching, highly recommend you sign up for one of our live free trainings. It's a Zoom call. I'm coaching people for free. This is not a recorded webinar, right? And you get to participate. It's interactive. And you can sign up for that at rockstarcommunicator.com.
Both of those things, comments, wherever my fingers are pointing, are going to show up. So there's comments and links for both the MasterTalk and the Rockstar Communicator.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it.
Of course, we got to help. We got to support. This has been great. So I think that we're actually getting close to the times, but I want to know a little bit more about like how you came to your niche. Because I think when you think about like that spread, like a lot of people started that YT. Where did you first decide going, this is where I'm going to dig deep?
Absolutely. I'm glad you asked me that question because not a lot of people do. Here's my take on it. Okay. I think comparison is an excellent thing. A lot of people think comparison is bad. You should never compare yourself to other people. But for me, comparison is a tool, Gene. Right? It's a tool. That means if you compare the wrong things, you'll get the wrong outcomes. Yeah. So if we compare each other's wealth, the Bugattis that we have, the cars, and then we're using comparison the wrong way. Then we're like, I don't have a car, blah, blah. Right? Versus if we compare the right things, which is I want to be an NBA player, let's say, not me, but as an example. Yeah. And then you look at Kobe Bryant, you really study somebody, what he's done. Then you realize quickly that you don't want to be an NBA player because you're like, holy geez, that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
He made a decision to be the best in the world at like 10 years old. Like what? Yeah. And then it's like, okay, cool, I got it, Kobe. You had an amazing life. I don't want to be an NBA player. But notice how comparison is helping us now, because it's helping us understand what is the price of admission. What's the cost of playing this game? Yeah. Right? And that's the most important piece when figuring out a niche. So one strategy I recommend people to do is make a list of everything that you're interested in doing. So for me, I'll be honest, I didn't know either 3 years ago. I had career coach. I knew I wanted to be a teacher, a coach, an educator, not in the school system, but like this, but I didn't know what to teach. So I pretty much came down to 3 options: life coaching, career coaching, and public speaking coaching. That was basically my 3. So let's go through all 3 because I think that's useful for people. So life coaching, I'm a pretty good life coach, and I coach some of my clients who hire me for communicate a bit on their life too. Yeah. And I've gotten people results. But when I compare myself to all of the life coaches in the world, I'm probably a top, if I'm being honest with myself, I'm probably a top 8-10%er in coaching other people in their life. So when I compare myself to someone like Tony Robbins, I was like, well, Tony's pretty much poured his whole life into this. I don't think I could beat the guy. I think he's amazing. I think I could build a really successful life coaching business, but I don't feel like I could be best in the world at that thing or good enough where I'm satisfied with my life. Number 2 is career coaching. I've placed people in multiple jobs, and I still do because a lot of people hire me for communication to do job interviews. Yeah. But once again, if I compare myself to all of the career coaches in the world, including some clients that I coach, these people are much better than I am. They're good. Like, they're really strong. I'm all right. I could probably build a multiple 6-figure coaching practice, but I don't think this is what I'm called to do. But then when I got to communication coaching, I was like, wait a second. I have a lot of insights that nobody in this industry is thinking about. Like, how would the world change if you're an exceptional communicator, right? Thinking about that question, focusing on the positives of communication. I'm shocked I'm the first person to ever think about that question. But that's one example of hundreds of insights I feel I have more than the industry. So it's like, yes, I can be a top 1% coach, if not higher in this industry. That's my focus. So just bringing this back to a principle, Gene, one part is going, make a list of all the things you're good at. The second piece is comparing yourself to other people in that industry. And number 3, which is the most important one, is comparing the right things and being really honest with yourself. Can I actually be good enough that generates me the income, the lifestyle, and the fulfillment that I actually need? And once you have that self-awareness, you'll make the right decision for yourself.
I love that. There is just so much goodness to that. And actually, you're tying right into like a recent episode of Impact Theory. The guest was talking about, like, he was like, oh, I'm going to go into sports and what it's to be an athlete. And I think he used the Kobe comparison. Like, and looking into, be like, what does it take somebody at that elite level to be at that elite level? And going through the list and going, here's all the things. I don't want to do like half of that. Be like, well, then you're not going to be at that elite level. So you can choose to either play in your average, or if you want to be elite, like, are you willing to do the elite work?
You need to send me that episode. I need to consume that. That's really
I will
good,
send
man.
it to you after this. Yeah.
That's like perfect. He explained it way better than I ever could. I need to
Oh,
learn, or gal, I need to learn from this person.
Oh no, it's just interesting how like the universe works and these messages like we're just connected. I was listening to it while dropping the kids off at school today, but it's it's like, are you willing to use that comparison tool and not and you're right, people are going to look at and feel like, I don't want to compare myself to anybody. I'd be like, then do you want to be elite? Like you have to, like that's how you find out compared to what you're doing and what they're doing. And then you can take what that is and put your own spin on it and dig down your 50 inches, your 50 feet, or until you feel like no longer digging. It's like, but that's the work that you're going to have to do. You're going to keep having to get better at that and build towards that. And it doesn't mean you're that right away, but if you can focus onto your deep T, be like, you have an opportunity to be elite at that if you put the effort in.
Absolutely right, man. Love that analogy.
Yeah. So, thank you so much for sharing that, because I think that's always like, that's an important part, especially in anybody's like entrepreneur, and maybe even taking into like, what kind of employee do I want to be? Like, what kind of person do I want to be? Is like kind of identifying like, what are the things that you like doing, and what are the things that you like doing that you'd be willing to like work your face off at.
Well said.
Yeah. Man, you know how I said before we got started, I'm going to look up and we're going to be beyond 40 minutes. And here we are, man. This conversation could just keep going. This has been a great episode. It's so much gems, and I've really enjoyed getting to know you through it all. But
Likewise, man.
I want to respect your time. So we already gave the shout out to the rock star. Is there anything else that you want to give a shout out to?
Yeah, man, to you. I felt you were such an incredible interview, so thanks so much for your questions. Really got me thinking in ways that I actually haven't been thinking of in a while, like the way that you helped me connect the case competition, obsessiveness for details into what I do today. So thanks for that. That was really magical.
Couldn't have done it without you, and I appreciate that. And thank you for being so open and peeling back that curtain on all of that. It's cool to see your journey. I'm excited to see where it continues to take you, my friend.
Of course. Thanks so much, brother.
All right. So before we let you go, I ask everybody the same question. So we're going to hop into my time machine. We're going to go back 10 years, fling open that door. What's that piece of advice you'd give to yourself?
Sure. I always like to end with a book recommendation, some life advice, Gene.
Right,
so the book recommendation is a book called Thirst by Scott Harrison. I think Scott is an absolute savant when it comes to marketing, branding, storytelling. He's the CEO of Charity Water, and he helps people gain access to clean water. I think the guy's one of the smartest guys on the planet. And he has a great quote that I'd love to end with. And the quote is, "The goal is not to live forever, but rather create something that will." I thought that was so powerful because he's so right. The goal is we can't live forever. We're not going to stay here for a long time. But while we're here, we can create something that's really magical. So that's what I would tell my younger self.
Man, that's a powerful statement. That has legacy built all over it. Drew Stevens, who was a guest here a couple episodes ago from Beyond the Legacy, talks about like building legacy. But that quote is just, yes, I love it. Thank you so much. So everybody, thank you so much for watching the show. I really appreciate it. And as well, if you want to know more about Brenden, he's got the links down below. They're also in the comments. So definitely check him out at rockstarcommunicator.com to go figure out what's it going to take for you to be that one top % in your industry. And we're going to end it with, go find one thing that you want to build some legacy around. And then until next week, I'm Gene, the co-active coach, and we will see you then.